Right. Right. Let's go. 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 Let's get Natnael in the chat. The live is here. So let's all. I hope you've all tuned in, saw my story. I hope you're all ready to go for what should be very exciting live. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Let's get into it because we have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about Formula One in terms of law and business. What we're putting into terms for the budget cap, for Liberty Media, for what else is there? For new teams, we're talk about new teams as well. Why that's not happening in terms of what's it called?
Hello.
Hello. How are we doing
How are
that
you?
now? Good to see you, my friend.
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you, bro?
Good, I'm great. Good to see you. Good to see you. What you been up to? What have you been up to since we
Uh,
last spoke?
well, it's been mostly just uni, really. Just getting back to
Yeah.
it.
Are you living at
Yeah,
uni or
and
at home? I can't remember.
no, I'm living at uni, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's been I had to move, of course, because it's not that close. So yeah,
Which uni is that again?
Uni of Leicester.
Uni of Leicester. Good fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah. Good fun.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But what about yourself?
Yeah. Been at uni. Obviously had summer. Summer was good. Mashed as much content as I possibly could. Moving on
Yep.
to interviews and stuff, which is good fun. And then yeah, been back at uni now. And yeah, just keeping up the content. I'm running out of what's it called? Running out of interview content now, so I've got to go and do some more filming days. I can't keep plucking from that Silverstone day like I keep doing. So
Yeah.
I've run out now. So like I said, we'll get back on the streets. Do some. I think I'm going to do some round in and around Reading, my university. Do some in and around Reading. Speak to some students, some student F1 fans, get their views and opinions. Maybe go out on a day as well. Yeah, there's lots of opportunity to do so. You can do it wherever, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised your content lasted as long as it did. Did you have to repost a few things?
Yeah, some things. So some videos were reposted. Yes, I'm guilty. But that does play to advantage sometimes, especially the ones that do well. And
Yeah.
yeah, I basically just got did as many interviews as I possibly could on day. I remember thinking like this can last me for months if I just do loads and loads and loads and loads. So I just kept going. And yeah, there's still. I think I'm gonna post later the last video I can from that day, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so we're here to talk about the budget cap, new teams in Formula One, and of course, what's the final thing? You want to talk about Liberty Media as well? We can answer some questions in the chat as well. We'll do all that, and we're going to put it in the perspective of law, which is Natnael's expertise, and business, my expertise. So you lot can get some perspective and new, fresh insight into why F1 works like that potentially, because I think it's important to put that kind of spin on it for viewers, because obviously fans just want what they think, what they see, what they think is best. But law, business, all kind of things, psychology, they all come into it in their own different ways and influence decision making. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, excited to get into it.
All right. So yeah, budget cap. That's the first, that's the big one. Over the last few
Yeah,
weeks.
We'll start with that. I mean, the thing is, I think you've got a much better grip on this than I do, because you can get your law head around this. I imagine you do a lot of research into it as well. I only know the basic fundamentals of the story, of the breach, of everything like that. So if you could tell me in a little bit more detail, what have Red Bull actually done?
Okay, so obviously last Monday they gave out the compliance certificates. This meant that the FIA obviously did their accounting, and from that they concluded that from that 7 teams complied with the regulations, the financial regulations as they were in 2021. That being your Ferraris, your Mercedes, your McLarens, pretty much every team except Red Bull, Aston Martin, and Williams.
Oh, there was a
With
third one that was
William,
up in the air, was there? Williams.
yeah.
I
So
thought it was
with
just Aston
Williams,
Martin and Red Bull.
yeah. So with Williams, this was back in March. they didn't hand in a piece of document on time. We don't know what document that was.
Oh, that was it. That rings a bell now. Yeah.
Yeah, so from that, they didn't hand it, I think it was a March 31st, March 30th, I don't know how many days there are in that month. But they had handed it on late, and then from there, they were invited into an accepted breach agreement. I'll talk more about that. It's like a settlement, if you can think of it that way. And then they were just told, you know what, take this fine, pay it, and we need you to just comply with the rest of the regulations. And that's what Williams did. With Aston Martin, it's a similar thing. They had a procedural breach, which is the same as what Williams suffered. We don't know what they did wrong. And then with Red Bull, it's a procedural breach. That's probably in relation to the documentation of how they filled out their documents, and the financial breach that we know is an actual minor overspend breach. So from that perspective, it just means they paid, I think it's like 7 million approximate. That's the maximum they could have overspent by.
That's the 5% minor infringement, isn't it? The 7.5 million, whatever.
Yeah. So the 5% thing, people have mentioned that, is that threshold too high? Is that too low? It's just simple accounting. So in accounting terms, they would basically, when drafting these sorts of documents, they would always regard 5% as being like acceptable to an extent. And then over that is a material breach, which they regard is, in terms of their accounting lingo, more serious. And so from that perspective, it's to the FIA, Red Bull have overspent. Red Bull think they haven't, and as such, they might have filled out the documents wrong, and that's why they got a procedural breach. So that's what Red Bull have committed in terms of an offence. In terms of when we'll find out what punishment they get, if they get a punishment that people think is acceptable, that could be a while, because if the Williams element is as true as it is, in terms of it took them until, I think it was June the 7th when it was announced that Williams had taken their fine.
Yeah,
talking two and a bit months, and we don't know if this is going to go public. We don't know if this is in terms of like how the story will develop. Will it be something that the FIA will go, all right, let's settle this, let's just write down a document and accept an ABA, which would be a settlement of some sort, just Red Bull accepting that they have broken the rules, whichever rules they are, and they have overspent, and as such, they can't say, we haven't done this, or we won't challenge this in the future. That's one of the conditions of an accepted breach agreement, which is why I just don't see Red Bull going that far yet. We don't know whether they're going to draft lawyers into this or not, but I just think it's going to get very, very messy the longer that Red Bull drag this on. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at the moment. I think we're in just a bit of a lull period with that, and I don't think we'll get any more news for a while.
So you think it could take a long time for the punishment to come through on Red Bull?
Yeah, I think it'll take a while, because it's just the FIA regulations just allow it for it to possibly drag out.
So a procedural breach. A procedural breach isn't it's the same as overspending up to 5%, or is procedural breach an accounting error?
It can be an account. It can be just simply they put in the wrong numbers, but that would be more in line with what an overspend breach would be, or the reasoning for that. In terms of what a procedural breach is, it's simply just, for example, filing documents not on time, or it could be, I don't have the procedural list off the top of my head, but it could just simply be, you just filled out your documents in a wrong way. That the FIA
Okay.
just go, yeah, that's something that we don't like, and as such, they didn't get their compliance.
And did you mention
But
Aston Martin in there? So what's the situation with them? What have they done?
with them, it's just a simple procedural breach. So they haven't overspent. All the other teams except Red Bull have not overspent. So,
Okay.
whenever they were told as their budget, because people will look at the $145 million, but that's excluding a lot of things. So
Yes.
that could be that figure, depending on whichever team it is. It could be 150 million for Red Bull, or it could be 160 for another team. So because of all that sort of stuff, that's part of the reason why this dragged out in the first place. But it's we just don't know where, in terms of Aston Martin's, I think their solution is really simple. I think they'll just take their punishment and take a
Wait,
fine and then move on.
Aston Martin didn't overspend, or did they? They didn't
They didn't.
overspend.
They didn't.
Okay. So what did they do wrong? Sorry. If you
They
could
just had
put that simply, summarize it. Aston Martin did.
a procedural breach. That's what it's
Okay.
called.
Okay.
So that's the same thing as Williams, but we don't know the reason for that
Okay. So that'll be
breach yet.
a minor fine or a reprimand or something along those lines.
Something like that. Yeah.
Williams was fined. What was it? 25 grand. It was nothing, wasn't it? It was something.
Yeah. They just had. I just think they didn't
Negligible.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, something negligible. It's just something that they can live with. And yeah, I think depending on what it is, we can expect a similar fine for them.
And so, what do you think would be an appropriate punishment for Red Bull? I've got three in my mind that I would accept as appropriate punishments. I don't want the 2021 Drivers' Championship being hampered with. I want it to stay as it is.
Yep.
Verstappen won it. The controversy happened. What happened. Keep it in the past. Let's not change it again, because it's a very unique way that 2021 ended.
Yep.
So let's not dig that up again. That it is what it is. Don't change it. There's enough controversy around it already. So I don't want that hampered with. What I would be happy seeing is disqualification from the World Constructors' Championship of 2021 for Red Bull, because that is severe enough so it sets a precedent going forward. And also, if that was the case, they'd have to pay a lot of damages to pay back all the prize money and everything that comes with that.
Yeah.
Number two, another appropriate punishment, I think, would be a points deficit at the start of 2023, if we get the news in time, like Derby County did last year in the championship, something like that.
Yeah.
Minus 50, minus 100, minus 150 points for driver and team.
Yep.
I think that'd be good. And finally, the third option I think would be good would be a massive fine. Like we're talking McLaren 2007 style fine, £100 million plus fine. I think that is severe enough. In today's money, £100 million is almost 150, 130, 140 million. So maybe a £200 million fine, just a ridiculous fine, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. I won't disagree with you, because obviously that's your take on it. For me, I think I made a video on it, and it did. Let's just say, I think it wasn't the most popular. Let's just say that.
Right. Let's hear it then.
So what it was, I agree with you. Points in terms of drivers' championship should be unaffected. For me, it just sets off it just sets off more problems. Then, because I just don't think handing a championship the way it was given in the first place and then taking it away again, it just doesn't make sense for me. So you can argue whether that's fair, but in terms of instead of in terms of creating more problems, that does no good. So for me, that's not what we should be looking at. But
So you agree with me in the sense you want the Drivers' Championship unaffected, kept the same of 2021, yeah?
yeah, yeah. So
Good.
then I apply the same philosophy for constructors championships because I feel that the other penalties that I have are severe enough to where they can basically counteract it.
Okay.
So yes, constructors championships unaffected, drivers championship for that year unaffected.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There is nothing within the regulations that explicitly states you can take points away from following seasons. So I haven't applied that.
I see. That's interesting. Maybe
So
that's not an option at all then.
it it might just be something that they won't include
Yeah.
for that. So another thing that let me just cite the in the actual notes that I had on that. So because I don't fully remember it myself. There is notes. There we are. So yeah, so what I would do if I was Red Bull. Okay, so I applied I used the 5% threshold, but only if it were, so within that, I had my own threshold. So I put a 1.5% threshold, which in itself was over $2 million. So the following penalties I would apply if it was above that, but under
Above
5%.
above above
Above, yeah. So above 1.5%, but lower than 5%,
got you.
would be a public reprimand. You just throw it in there because you
Why
just
not?
do it.
Yeah.
A 50% reduction of aero and CFD hours.
Okay,
That
nice. That's good as
and then
well. I like that.
in 2023, and then a 25% reduction in 2024.
Okay. Oh, you want to carry it
A
over a couple of seasons?
yes,
Now that nail is severe. That's
because
giving a
a
lasting hangover.
because as Toto Wolff said it himself, if you overspend in 1 year, particularly as it carries on towards the new regulations in terms of you could have developed, because I think who was it? At Haas, they mentioned that their entire development budget was about $5 million for the entirety of this year. So the fact that you can overspend by over 2 million, for example,
Yeah.
is something that I would still regard as a serious enough event to where that can affect the following year's development, and as such, taking that sort of penalty. A
Yep, I hear
$3
you on
million
that.
fine. A $3 million fine. I know Red Bull can pay that with like
That's pocket change.
any of their energy drinks sort of portfolio. Then they will be barred from
Was this
free
combined? The
practice
three
session.
$3 million fine and then in
Yeah,
one?
combined. Yeah,
Yeah.
all of it in one. Then barring free practice and qualifying sessions, so they wouldn't take part in that at all. That's so it might mean
Jesus.
it might be meaningless because they might come back from 19th and 20th to go 1-2, but you are within the regulations. You are allowed to be taken away from stages, as they would call them.
Really?
From
That's interesting.
yes, so
That is
not the
interesting.
races themselves because of the avoidance of doubt, because they might have done it wrong, the accounting, the FIA side. But if it was a material overspend, they can exclude them from races entirely. But in
And
this
and
scenario,
back to the qualifying. They can from
they
different
can
stages
do
of the weekend.
exactly. Then a 20% reduction of the cost cap. So that would be
Wait, hang on. Is the 20% reduction in the cost cap all part of everything you said already?
all part of it, and for
Including
next year.
including the 75 and 25% reduction.
Yep.
Wow. Now this is severe. This is very severe.
So assuming that 20% reduction is of the base of 135 million, I believe that comes out to what's my figure? It comes out to about $27 million reduced
Mm-hmm.
from that. So
Mm-hmm.
their base figure could be the level of spending that has spent in a particular year.
Yeah.
And then 10% reduction cap in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Then preseason testing, they would be barred from it for next year. So in Bahrain, they wouldn't take
Yeah.
part in it at all. And then no, what they would call previous car testing in 2023. So if you've seen McLaren, they've been doing the tests with Pato O'Ward and
Yeah.
Alex Palou.
Alpine does it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't do that. So I
Okay.
wouldn't allow that at all for 2023. That's an above $2 million spend, but less
Mm-hmm.
than 7 million or whatever it is. It would be significantly less
You are evil with
severe.
that, man. You are
It
evil.
would be it would be significantly less severe if it was less than 1.5%, but still, it would be a bit of a burden.
A bit.
A bit of a burden, yeah.
Yeah, to say the least. So everyone who just heard that, that is everything in one as one punishment. Wow. That is severe. And that would set a precedent going forward, to say the least. I'm sure Toto Wolff will be happy with that. I'm sure Mattia Binotto will be happy with that. I'm sure Zach Brown will be happy with that as well. So that's what you put forward as a punishment for Red Bull, is it?
Yeah. I don't think Toto would be happy, though. I still think he wants Lewis to get that World Drivers' Championship.
Does he? You think he wants them to overturn it behind the desk?
I think he does, because he's not publicly said, he's not ever mentioned Red Bull for the sake of not getting sued, but he clearly is not happy with this, and so in my opinion, I think it's another opportunity for him to just go, well, this championship was a bit dodgy. Can you turn it around now for us?
Yeah, I mean,
So
I cannot believe 2021 happened. It was just it was unreal, wasn't it? When they ended that championship. But yeah, I mean, I can get into Toto's headspace and think why he weren't turned around. It's a massive jab at Red Bull. It's another win for them against Red Bull. It's 8 for 8, isn't it? Double 8 to do that. And it's also another stab at Michael Massey. It's a finger to Michael Massey saying, yeah, you got it wrong. Red Bull, we won that championship.
Exactly.
So from a team principal point of view, I can see why he'd want it done that way, because obviously he doesn't care about the romance of winning it on track like the fans do, like I do. So yeah, I can see why I'd want that. And then I mean, the most important thing is FIA do a severe punishment, like we've agreed, because otherwise, like Mercedes said, like McLaren have said, they'll just overspend in the future as well. But I think this decision would be a lot easier if it wasn't for the unique nature of 2021 and all the politics going around at the moment and everything like that. It's making the FIA's job very difficult, and it's a key decision for Mohammed Ben Sulayem in his first year to make. He's got to make it right, make the right decision. Otherwise, like we said, it's going to be chaos going forward, and it's going to make the entire project having a budget cap in Formula One is going to completely make that whole thing redundant if they don't do a severe punishment. I think Ross Brawn has not done any good by saying back in 2019, if you overspend on the cost cap, you lose your championship. I think that he's put the FIA in a little prison now by doing that. But I mean, he's just foresighting the seriousness of having a budget cap in the sport. And the reason we have a budget cap now is so we don't have teams like Lotus, like HRT, like Virgin Racing join the sport on the basis there is going to be a budget cap, and then there isn't, and then they're just back markers for 3 years and run out of money. So that's a problem. That does bring us very nicely onto our next topic of new teams. Now, what are your thoughts? I made a video on this a few weeks ago about new teams. I did an email as well. I don't know if you're subscribed to the newsletter. I did an email about why Stefano Domenicali is correct about F1 not needing new teams. I totally agree with him. I think 10 teams is perfect. Where do you stand on new teams coming into the sport? Do you think we should have more? Do you think we should, or should we keep it at 10? What do you reckon?
In terms of new constructors, I don't have a problem with the 10. I do think there needs to be more power unit manufacturers. So I think that at the moment we only have three, like actual manufacturers. I know Red Bull is still kind of having their relationship with Honda, but we know
You've
that
got Alpine,
after,
Mercedes, Ferrari in that three, correct?
yeah, so
Yeah.
we know that those three have been very committed to the sport. Even with we had Renault, of course, who temporarily pulled out and then came back 2016 as a manufacturer
Yeah.
sort of thing, but they've always still been an engine manufacturer.
Yeah.
So that three you can rely upon, but it's still a bit of concern that there is only three plus Honda plus slash Red Bull powertrains, whatever you want to call them. So for me, that's why Audi are very important in this. But obviously, if they are just going to, what it looks like to be, they're going to purchase Sauber, then I think that's fine.
Yeah. Well, they're just going to replace
But
Alfa Romeo, but in a more hands-on way, I think. Well, they're going to become a manufacturer, aren't they? So,
yeah,
actually, to be
yeah,
fair, I think, no, in a more hands-on way, because Sauber, I was looking at their hierarchy a few months ago for a video, I think. Sauber, everything's done by Sauber in the name of Alfa Romeo.
yeah,
Like, their whole supply chain, their whole operations are all run by Sauber. Whereas I think now, with Audi buying Sauber, that will change to everything being run by Audi, I believe, is my understanding. The only difference between the Alfa Romeo and the Audi project is that Audi are much more hands-on. And I guess they
yeah,
have to be if they're a constructor, so a manufacturer.
yeah. So yeah, you're right on that. From what I've read as well, in 26, once this is started, the powertrains division will be in Germany, and the sort of the the chassis side would be in Switzerland still. And so that would it'd still be a 50-50 in terms of,
Okay.
car making, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of shares, that'll all be owned by the VW group. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of that relationship, it makes sense. Alfa Romeo have been very clear that they're not particularly interested in buying equity into Sauber, nor do they want to be part of this operation from more than a
Yeah.
marketing element.
It's
And so,
Alfa Romeo is a glorified sponsorship of Sauber. That's all it is.
exactly. And so, yeah, once that relationship ends at the end of next year, we'll probably see an Audi badged car, but it'll be powered by Ferrari until 25, at the end of 25.
Okay. Oh yeah, no, I forgot Alfa Romeo coming off the Sauber in at the end of 2023. I completely forgot about that. And then so 2024, 2025, you're saying what you think will be Audi branded, but still Sauber basically.
Yeah.
And then 2026 will see the fruits of the manufacturer itself.
Yeah. So,
Audi.
yeah, I think Audi have been.
It would have been
Audi
nice.
have been.
Go ahead.
All right. So yeah, I think Audi have been very fortunate in that they were given the dyno type, so basically the prototype to the V6 engine,
Mm-hmm.
by Porsche. Of course, we know that Porsche wanted to have an engine ready.
They did. Well,
back in 20.
Apparently they made an engine a few years ago and almost got it up and running,
Yeah.
just to prove that they could do it. I think I'm not sure who it was, but yeah, Porsche actually made an F1 engine and were like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is what we can do. I can't remember the reason why they did it, but they did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were gifted that, and now that obviously presents problems for Porsche, who have not got that relationship secured with Red Bull now. So from Audi's perspective, I think they're just looking at it and going, next 5 years, we want to progress ourselves further forward, and kind of do, in a similar way, come in and do what BMW did
Yeah,
after 2006, and kind of just slowly progress themselves to the front, albeit not be as quite as aggressive as what BMW did, because
how are they?
they
I don't really know much about that project in terms of what do you mean
so
aggressive.
Yeah, so what they wanted to be world champions in 4 years.
Wow.
So 2006, 2007, it was looking very good in terms of the progression. They were
Yeah.
in the midfield. The Sauber was always a midfield car with the
Yeah.
Petronas years.
It always has been, hasn't it? I suppose.
And then in 06, 07, they made steps forward. They were the third fastest in 2007. It was like quite obvious.
So yeah,
But
2008 they're really on it.
and then 2008, they made an unexpected charge because they didn't think they would be competitive well, as competitive as they were. And then what happened was they shifted their development towards the 2009 regulations, which are huge, like bigger
And
than
they
2022.
they fucked
Um,
first, didn't they?
and then they shifted their development way too early. Kubica didn't um,
Couldn't then
get the
compete.
car he wanted to win the World Championship. And then in 2009, they flopped, as you mentioned, and they went towards the middle of the pack. And then that's when BMW
I mean,
decided, you know what, we can't be asked.
they were borderline
And
backmarkers in 2009. They were worse than Ferrari and McLaren that year. They were so
yeah,
bad. They were
yeah,
arguably second worst, even possibly the worst team on the grid that year.
yeah, they were bad.
They were nowhere.
Yeah, and then yeah, they pulled out. They pulled out at the end of yeah, it
2009.
was towards the end. Yeah, towards the end of 2009, and then yeah, Peter Sauber had to buy back the team just to make sure it was surviving because
Yeah,
it was that unexpected. And then yeah,
they were just
they,
plain Sauber 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, weren't they?
yeah,
Um,
and yeah, it's just been a bit.
yeah, I think it would have been romantic to see Audi become their own team, an 11th team on the grid. And even Porsche, that'd also be nice to see on paper. I think it'd be great to have Porsche F1 team, Audi F1 team as an 11th team.
Mhm.
But like I said in my video, I don't know if you saw it, 10 teams is the market equilibrium for Formula One, whether you like it or not. If you put an 11th team in the mix, um, everything becomes unbalanced, and suddenly you have a sport that's not necessarily as economically viable as it was before. You know what I mean by equilibrium, right?
Yeah, yeah,
All market forces are balanced, so the prize pot money, the commercial value of teams and drivers, the supply chains, everything to do with the business side of Formula One is all balanced with 10 teams. You
yeah,
put an 11th team in there, that shifts all of that whole dynamic, and suddenly, like Stefano Domenicali said, you've got a F1 grid that's too crowded and isn't balanced. And Formula One is a sport, and sport is business, whether you like it or not. It's got to make economic sense, which is why 10 teams is perfect for Formula One. As much as we'd like to see an 11th team, an Audi join, a Porsche join as an 11th entity, it can't happen at the moment, I'm afraid.
yeah.
It's
I
also
think there's
what
too many.
part of the reason why Marussia failed in 2016. I don't think there's actually room for an 11th team. Like we've already got McLaren, Alpine, Williams, Aston Martin, and what will be Audi, all vying to get to the front of the grid. And obviously, as the years go on, we're going to have. I think we are going to have a more condensed grid in 2023, 4, 5, and 6. But like I said, it just becomes too crowded, and then not as economically viable as before, because everything devalued. The more scarcity is key. Scarcity creates value, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. You're right on that. It's just there's too many roadblocks anyway. To get an 11th team. Of course, we know that there's a $200 million buy-in, which is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yep,
But it's been created for a reason. Um,
correct.
we just know that teams would, manufacturers, road car manufacturers, or Andretti, for example, just know that they would rather buy into an actual team that already exists,
Yep.
where of course we know that they don't have to build a
So,
factory,
yeah,
they don't have to build a
there's pushback
simulator, whatever.
on there's pushback on Andretti because obviously, like we said, it's an 11th team. Toto Wolff is not threat. Stefano Domenicali is not threat. But there is a but. If they're obviously they've got a pitch to get into F1, they have to pitch. Every team has to pitch. If the pitch and value proposition is correct, it could work. So if they're willing to do X, Y, Z for the sport, if they're willing to whatever value proposition they put forward, if it's good, if it's viable, it can happen. But the value proposition has to be correct. It's got to be on the money in terms of what they're going to bring to the sport, how they're going to add to the sport. Whether that be entering new markets in America. Obviously, F1's already broken the American market. If they can break it in certain areas, if Andretti can bring certain people to the sport, all that kind of thing. If the value they take away by joining, they can make up in other areas, then it can happen.
Yeah.
But that's a stretch for them to do that, obviously. And it's probably not the way they want to enter the sport, which is why, like you said, buying into a team is potentially better.
Yeah, it's just, we know that Andretti tried to buy Sauber themselves, but we know that didn't work. And so from their perspective, they were just thinking, you know what, we want to get into F1. It's, the Andretti name is big enough in their eyes. But, Toto's just like, you got to bring what you're going to bring in terms of value, in terms of from a monetary side. They're gonna have split prize money anyway, and so teams are gonna not want to give up that over the few years just for another team, and so I think there'll be way more interest if there was a manufacturer involved, and we know that there isn't the situation where you can. I think Haas, for example, part of the reason they were able to get in was because they were able to buy a facility in the UK. I forgot where it is. That was from Manor when they fell apart,
and they also have a significant technical partnership with Ferrari, which helps them no end, obviously.
Exactly, and so they're now building a joint facility in Maranello. So
that's right.
It just makes more sense for them.
And obviously, when you've got Ferrari, Mercedes, and probably Red Bull as your biggest commercial assets in the sport, adding another team to it only devalues them. You've got to, make the most of your cash cows. You've got to milk your cash cows for what they are. And if you add an 11th team to that, it just devalues them. It doesn't work for F1. And obviously, where F1 is at the moment, trying to grow, you need those massive brands to be pushing it as much as possible. And adding an 11th team to take spotlight off them takes a slice of every facet of the sport off of them. So that's the problem. So we'd like to see an 11th team in the sport. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. There's going to be a lot of pushback on it. Not only that, but it's also very difficult for teams to put together the right facilities, operations, and value proposition to enter the sport anyway.
Yeah.
So there we go on that. So should we answer a few questions in the chat? I don't know. Have we got the same chat feed, or have you got a different one?
I think I've got a different one because
So Max Checkett says, Ollie, welcome, Max. Hope you're doing well. Terry Coffee Corner says the minus. So going back to the budget cap, says the minor sporting penalties don't allow you to take points away from future championships. Yeah, like you said, so points deficit at the start of 2023 is going to be unlikely. Ali says budget cap aim for teams like Lotus and HRT. That's what 200 million buy-in you require. Yeah, I think you misunderstood me on that, Ali. My point being that Lotus and HRT didn't survive because it wasn't a budget cap. They couldn't compete because they aren't the massive entities that Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren are. Alfa Romeo is basically naming rights, correct. Porsche should look to Williams or Andretti, maybe McLaren. Yeah, Porsche could buy in onto those teams. Williams, probably not going to happen because the Dalton Capital project is in full flow. McLaren, I feel like. Sorry?
No, the McLaren thing. McLaren are not giving up equity. They're just not.
No, they're not. 100% not giving up equity. McLaren are McLaren. It's like they're just as an iconic name as Ferrari, I think. Well, maybe not quite, but they're in that league. McLaren being a customer holds them back. To an extent, they did compete as McLaren Mercedes, though. They did compete as McLaren Mercedes for a long time. So, yeah, it holds them back in a sense. But I don't think it's crucial for them because they competed before as a customer. And, yeah, I think they can compete with... What do you reckon on that?
I don't think they... I think there's still a limitation because when McLaren... I made a video... Yeah, I think you saw my video. We'll talk about McLaren's limitations. And I mentioned one of them being a customer thing. When McLaren won its championships, 7 out of their 8 constructors' championships were won under what was it called? Under a
Honda.
works operation. So they had exclusive engines.
Is that with Honda?
Yeah, Honda back
Yeah.
in the 80s. The Targ relationship, the Mercedes in the 1998, they won their last championship. It's just been this has always been a thing where, Ferrari have benefited from that as well. They've always built their own engines. And Mercedes now, they have a works operation themselves. And when Mercedes did actually come along in 2010, McLaren were immediately not prioritized anywhere near as much as they were in terms of engine development, in terms of being given the right parts. There was one story that I think it was 2014 when basically when McLaren had an issue with their engine, what happened was Mercedes were like, we'll happily fix your engine issue, but you have to get your mechanics out at the garage and let our Mercedes engine and close the doors behind you. So they could see all the stuff in your car or whatever. And McLaren was just like, no, we'll wait a bit longer just for our McLaren mechanics to actually be there. So it's just things like that will mean it won't benefit them.
When it's just that whole Honda thing with McLaren was such an L for them. 2015 Honda first joined the sport, joined the engine. 15, 16, 17, all a complete disaster. 2018 decided to leave, go to Renault, the weakest engine manufacturer. They wanted to get rid of Honda. But I think there was a lot of Fernando Alonso-based pressure around that.
Yeah,
I think if it wasn't for Alonso, then they may have just stuck with Honda another year. But yeah, they left to go to Renault, and then that year Honda actually made an all right engine. Then 2019, their engine was good. 2020 even better. 2021 even better, and Red Bull then took over the fruits of McLaren's pain when it started to come good. And then McLaren Mercedes engines when they could be the worst manufacturer with Honda right now. So that whole Honda saga for McLaren is such an L.
Yeah, the works excuse was used by Ron Dennis to rush Honda in. That's what it was. I think if McLaren had decided 2015, let's just stick with Mercedes one more year while Honda were getting ready, maybe then we could have seen a more successful Honda relationship. But it was kind of from that 2015 start date, it was doomed from pretty much the beginning.
You think?
Yeah, because McLaren used Honda as the reason why their car was not that good. And of course, we knew, I think Eric Boullier made a statement going into 2018 when they had Renault engines that our target was to beat Red Bull. And they were nowhere near. They were nowhere near in 2018.
Very true,
so
very true.
They finished 6th in the Constructors' Championship. They were behind the works team.
Awful in 2018,
Yeah, and that caused Fernando to leave, and the McLaren, I think, let's say, improvement, because there hasn't been a resurgence, because I don't count one win in 10 years a resurgence. Yeah, sorry about that. I think somebody interrupted me. But yeah, it's just one of them. Sort of, it's just they haven't done what they needed to do, and I've mentioned that their factory and everything has now become outdated, and so it's just I don't think it would have been a successful relationship I think Red Bull could have gotten away with just being a midfield car in 2015 if they had Honda engines.
Yeah,
but of course we know that McLaren were a backmarker. So
they were a backmarker, and they were still a team that had everyone expects them to be a front runner in 2015 because 2012 they were still a front runner. 2013 they fell off. I don't know why. 2014 as well. Everyone still expected McLaren to be at the front. We were still missing a front runner. And then Mercedes took over from McLaren, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
But should we wrap it up there?
Yep, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that live. It was good. We got through a lot of content, budget cap, new teams, answered a bit of chat as well. Yeah. Oh, I saw a video the other day that was like you reacted to a tweet that was like McLaren are the most underperforming team in terms of what they've got, and you're like, no, it's Alpine, and that is facts.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's
true.
just
So true.
it's just like people go with Renault like, yeah, they're always a midfield team, but like
They're
I
a
haven't.
manufacturer, they're a works team.
They're works team. Like they have their own engines, they have their own factory. Nothing's stopping them from being at the front, and
That's right.
they have, unlike McLaren, a board and a road car manufacturing sort of element to it, where they're one of the biggest road manufacturers, right?
Mm.
They have the cash to compete with a Mercedes and
They have
a
cash, but
Ferrari financially.
they're also state owned.
They're
Renault
state
is a
owned.
state owned company, so
They're like it's
insane.
just
I
like,
know.
come on. Yeah, it's just like since
Maybe
2007 when they fell off, it's just we haven't seen Renault come back to the front. Even when they had that Lotus Renault partnership, that
mm,
wasn't a Renault
no.
owned operation because they sold off the team after 2009. So yeah, it's just that team, Enstone itself, has been just mediocre for a
Yeah,
decade and a half, and nobody talks about it to the same vein as McLaren
no.
because people know McLaren as a team that's won. But yeah,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that live. We should do it again at some point when
absolutely,
some more controversial topics pop up that need to be put in a law and business perspective, shall we?
of course.